Welcome to Good News Tucson TV. I'm Barney Murray, your host, and today we have with us Don McNiell of Mentoring Tucson Kids and one-on-one mentoring here in Tucson. Both organizations that have been set up to address the need of our youth. Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Barney. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you. Don and I have been working together a couple of years now with the different events. I've supported him in taking pictures and video, whatever he asked me to do. He's a good guy, and I believe in what he's doing. So, Don, just give us a little background about who you are and how you got into the...
Who I am.
Yeah.
I tell everybody I was born in Yuma, but it wasn't my fault. And my dad was a school teacher, and he taught there for a couple of years, and then he went to Ajo, which is probably not even as good of a place to live as Yuma. And then we moved to Mojave Desert in California, and he ended up teaching on a Navy base in the Mojave Desert. And but he had gone to college in Flagstaff, and my senior year, I kind of talked him into seeing if I could get into college. He didn't probably think I could, but he had a good friend that was the dean of students up there, because that's where he and my mom had met and gone to college there. So heard him on the phone saying, well, yeah, what's probation mean?
Oh, no.
So I got in on probation at what then was called Arizona State College, and now it's NAU, which does not stand for non-academic university. Okay, I found out. But we had a great time. I met my wife there my senior year, and we got married in Chicago. That's where she was from, and my mom thought I was marrying a foreigner, because that's like another country back there. But we've been married 46 years. We have two daughters, Marcy and Beth, and 5 grandchildren. They all live here in Tucson, and life's been good. Life's been great.
Sounds like it, full nonetheless. When it came to your faith, was that always a part of your life?
No, I was always interested in going to church. When I was a little kid, my parents did not go to church. My mom was a pretty heavy drinker. My dad had been raised Catholic, but when he was a teenager, his dad ran away from home out in California, ran off with somebody, went to San Francisco, and when he was about 16, his mom died. And he raised his younger brother and sister and got them through high school, and then he headed back east and came back 10 years later and ended up going to school in Flagstaff. But no, I was not raised in a church. When I was in college, I joined a fraternity my sophomore year. Was very, very disillusioned. I can remember leaving at the end of the school year and heading back to California, watching all my, not all of them, but most of my fraternity brothers drinking pretty heavily, and it's finals week, and I'm thinking, what are these guys doing? And so I knew that there was something that wasn't right in my life. I wasn't finding what would really make me happy. I got back to California. A good friend, a girl that I'd been dating off and on for quite a few years, invited me to go to chapel on the base. And all I remember is I needed a lifeguard to go to Mammoth Lakes up in the High Sierras and be the lifeguard for a junior high camp. And so I went to the chaplain's house and I said, I'm the guy. So I want to get out of that heat. And
to be a lifeguard?
Be a lifeguard, yeah.
Okay.
At the camp. And I was able to get off work from the summer job at the school where I was working. Had a great first 3 days. I had a bunch of boys in my cabin, and we were raiding all the other cabins and, raising all kinds of heck. And I thought they were probably going to send me home. And the Wednesday night of about the middle of the week, the chaplain invited me to his tent, his tent that night. And I thought I was in trouble, but it was really all about all the other counselors and myself talking about what's your purpose in life, why were you born here in this time in history and to this family and on this planet, and I had no clue. What was my purpose in life? I didn't know. And
Right.
I just remember going back to my cabin and laying there from about 4 in the morning. We got through, and about 5 o'clock I got up and went up to the top of this hill and watched the sun come up and started crying. I just said, God, if you're real, I need help, because I was a mess. And I finally realized what a mess I was, and my family was a mess, and we needed help. And I remember praying for everybody but me, to get help. And that's the last thing I remember until I was coming down the mountain, and in a big truck with this lieutenant, we'd packed up all the equipment and everything, and I remember him saying, "Hey, they got to you, didn't they?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I don't know. You're not the same person you were when you came up here." And I said, "Well, that's not a bad thing."
Right.
And that was the beginning of my journey.
How old were you then?
I was 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you were 20 and still in college at the time?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. When you came down off the mountain, had your mountain experience, so to speak, and your life had changed, your perspective had changed, how did you, when you got back to where the same environment you left, what changed?
Well, one of my best friends had gone to Oregon State University to play football, a guy named Pete Pfeiffer. Later to become All-American fullback, played in the Rose Bowl, played for the New York Giants football team, and he was my hero, even though we were the same age. And someone had come and talked to his football team about the Lord, and he accepted Christ at that time. And he was spending the whole summer at a place called Arrowhead Springs, which was the the headquarters for Campus Crusade for Christ at that time. Mm-hmm. And I thought he had flipped out. When I came home that summer and heard about Pete being at this place, I thought, I'll never see Pete again. He's flipped out. So then I go to the camp, and I come back, and I think, I need to call Pete.
Right.
And he came over, and he shared what God was doing in his life and invited me to come back down to Arrowhead Springs the next weekend. Thousands of college students come in from all over the United States to get trained in their faith. And as we drove in, I said, "Who are those guys?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "All those guys with the FCA T-shirts and bulging muscles and carrying Bibles." And he says, "Well, that's the Alabama football team." I said, "What?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "I thought you and I were the only jocks that believed in God. I didn't know anybody else." And so that was really the beginning of getting excited about being a Christian.
Wow.
Because I was pretty apprehensive at that time, like, really, who's going to believe me,
So it sounds like you needed to see somebody that looked and had the same interests that you had.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that was great.
And I've known you, and you've always been around sports. And matter of fact, you were a coach here, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
When did your coaching career start?
Started in Riverside, California. Right after we got married, we went out there, and I was a head football and track coach and assistant basketball coach. And I started out in a junior high school with 80 boys in every PE class. Hadn't even done student teaching yet, and it was a whole new experience for me. I loved it. Moved into the high school with these kids, became the head football and track coach, and after a few years, my wife wanted to live in Chicago. We tried that. It was too cold for her too. We came back and ended up here in '76. And in the late '80s, at that time I was a head track coach at Saguaro High School. Best kid I'd ever coached. A kid named Rex came out, and at the start of his sophomore year, his parents and his girlfriend's parents broke him up. He'd been going with this girl for a couple of years, and he got injured. Went to the game at Amphi. Wasn't going to get to play. Coach comes in at halftime all mad because they were losing, and he writes on the board, "Better to die than to lose." And the following Tuesday, he went out in the parking lot, got in his truck, and took his life with a shotgun. And it was the most horrific thing I'd ever experienced, and probably still to this day. And I knew that day that I was going to do something different. And it took a couple years to figure out how we were going to do this. We got a $50,000 grant from Pima County, and in 1995, we started full-time doing mentoring all over the county.
Okay. So it was the loss of a child, and the way the child took its life that kind of turned things around for you, that the purpose that you were questioned about up on the camp, that became realized after the death of this young man.
Right. I mean, I always thought I would just stay in coaching and teaching, and after that happened, I knew that life was going to change. I told my wife that we were going to do a mentoring program, and she says, "How are we going to do that?" And I said, "I don't know, but we're going to pray." And I remember sitting in front of 5 panelists for Pima County, and one of the guys, Carlos Podesto, asked me, he says, "So if we don't help you, how are you going to do this?" I said, "I don't know, but we're going to do it anyway."
Right.
Because there's a great need in Tucson. And so now we've been doing it almost 20 years.
At that point, was God engaged in, I know He was a part of your life, but as you started to pursue what you felt was a calling on your life, how did that factor in?
Well, I began to see the need in Tucson. This young man, Rex, had a wonderful family, great parents. He just lost his way. You know, he didn't have anybody to talk to because he was such an incredible guy that everybody came to him for their problems. And and I began to realize, though, that there are, as we know now, close to 30,000 kids in Pima County that are in single-parent homes, group homes, foster homes. There's at least 20,000 that have parents in prison, one or two parents in prison. And with all the mentoring programs in Pima County, including Big Brothers and Big Sisters, probably 1,500 kids a year get a mentor out of 30,000 that need it. Okay. So there is no end to the need and to, you know, the work that needs to be done.
Okay. So we're going to take a break now and have a word from our sponsors. But when we come back, now that Don has accepted the calling on his life and has started to think and consider how do I address the need of these kids, we'll talk about that as soon as we come back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Good News Tucson TV, and we're talking with Don McNiell of a couple of different mentoring programs here in Tucson. And in the first half, he told us a little bit about his background. But Don, you were saying that in Pima County alone, there are 30,000 kids that that could use mentoring, or what's that group?
Well, according to the Pima County Attorney's Office, there are at least 30,000 kids that live in single-parent homes or group homes or foster homes or with grandparents or friends or out on the street. You know, they're out there.
Okay.
And altogether, there are probably about 15 or 20 pretty strong mentoring programs in Tucson that are active out there. I started the Southern Arizona Mentor Coalition about 6 years ago, and including Big Brothers and Big Sisters and our 2 programs and all the others that are involved out there, there might be up to 1,500 kids a year that actually get a mentor. Okay. And so these are kids that are coming from pretty safe homes now, because once we get a referral on them to get a mentor, that means the father's gone or the mom's gone or they've been put in a place where they're pretty safe. Excuse me. And so there's the whole idea is for a mentor to meet with them on a once-a-week basis for a year, and then hopefully re-up after that. Every month we do big events. Big Brothers Big Sisters does pretty much the same thing. We do a lot of events together throughout the year, One of the biggest is the Mentor Day at U of A football game.
Right.
And we do fishing trips and do all kinds of things with the kids. But Pima County is ranked pretty much at the top, number one, which is really not a good thing, in teen drug use, teen pregnancy, teen smoking, teen suicide, for kids dropping out of high school.
Right.
Some of our high schools have close to a 50% dropout rate, which is outrageous.
Yes,
it's
it
horrible.
is. Yes, it is.
And there's no place for those kids to go because there's not enough jobs in town for them to get the help that they need. So,
Yeah, you mentioned the coalition that was formed of mentoring organizations, that there are like 20 active programs, and among those 20 active programs, there are the kids that get service are about 1,500.
probably out of 30,000.
So there are at least 28,000 kids that could benefit from having a mentor.
For sure.
Okay.
Right. And not all of them, that's just because they're living in a single-parent home, group home, foster home. If they're living with grandparents, if they've got real involvement with adults that are real active in their life, they may not really need a mentor, but everybody needs somebody in their life
Right.
to meet their needs,
Right.
to help them when there's a need, check on them at school. How are things going at school? We always, in our training, we always say, don't assume that things are going good at school and don't assume that things are going good at home. Because when you ask a kid, how's school going, they always say, fine. And then you go to the school with permission from the parent or the caregiver to talk to the teacher, talk to the counselor, check their grades. Then when the kid says everything's fine and it's not, then you can have an honest relationship.
Right.
And move on from there.
So so address the perception is that it's bad kids that need mentoring.
Right. When I started this program years ago, I had actually been to Denver for 1 year. My wife and I had gone up there. I was going to go to seminary, and somehow she got pregnant in December. So there was the end to go. There was the money to go to seminary, and I was mentoring a young African American boy named Leroy. He was a ninth grader and had never been out of his neighborhood. And we got to fly over Denver and do all this cool stuff. And he was not a bad kid. He just didn't have a clue what he was going to do with his life. And a single mom and two or three other brothers and sisters. And so that was probably more inspirational to me, probably more life-changing for me than it was for him. But I realized at that time that the great majority of the kids that we're going to end up mentoring aren't going to be kids that are in gangs. They're not going to want an adult mentor hanging out with them. All their buddies are going, hey, who's he,
Right.
But we do have teenagers that aren't into gangs, that are looking for help, that just they don't have a dad or they don't have anybody in their life that's significant. And we work with a lot of group homes. The Gap Ministry group homes on the north side are probably the best group homes in the state. Almost all the kids go to church, but there's 10 or 12 kids in those homes. Excuse me. And so they need to have somebody come in and help get these kids the one-on-one time that they need and give them the attention that they need.
From your perspective and data that you have, based on the number of requests that come before you, what percentage is male versus female?
I would say it's probably 60-70% male and the rest female, about 3/4 of male to female.
So it's pretty close to being balanced then.
It is. And, a lot of people think, well, it's all Hispanic or the African American kids or what, but it's pretty mixed there too. Because we have a very high poverty rate in Tucson, and it affects everybody.
Yes, it does. So the two organizations that you're the executive director for both of them, correct?
Right.
Okay, which two are they?
Well, in 1995, we started what was called One-on-One Partners. It was named after the program up in Denver that I was involved in. A great model, but it was a secular program. Basically, once we got it to Tucson, or we call it a community-based program, similar to Big Brothers. In 2007, I heard about a program in Phoenix called Mentor Kids USA. It was actually started when Chuck Colson went to prison for Watergate, which you're probably too young to remember that.
Thank you. But
no. He became a Christian and started prison fellowship all over the United States. And they started one mentoring program for kids in Phoenix, Scottsdale area called Mentor Kids USA. It was actually called Match Point and became Mentor Kids USA. And they originally started working with kids at Adobe Mountain School, which is a juvenile detention center that I had worked at back in the early 70s. So I knew the program, understood what they were doing, asked them what the USA stood for. They said, well, we think it's a great model. It should be all over the country. I said, well, how about Tucson? So we brought it to Tucson, and when the Penn State issue happened where the coach was molesting the kids, when all that happened, the Mentor Kids USA program in Phoenix decided that we should change our name because if something happened to us, we'd both get sued.
Right.
I think they got pretty paranoid about the whole thing, but that was their decision. So we changed it to Mentoring Tucson's Kids. I wish I would have made it Mentoring Pima County's Kids, because when I go to Sarita or Vail or Marana, they go, well, why don't you call it Mentoring Marana's Kids, So we actually have a satellite office in Marana now, and we're looking to have a satellite office down in Sahuarita, in the Green Valley area. So.
Cool. Yeah, so one is community and the other is faith-based.
Right. Mentoring Tucson's Kids is the faith-based program.
Now, from a parent's perspective, what are the advantages or why do I have a choice?
Well, if you're a parent and you're active in your church, whether it's Protestant or Catholic, and you want a mentor to come from that faith or that background, then you would request that your kid be in the Mentoring Tucson's Kids program. And if you don't care, and you're not, maybe some of them, maybe you don't want your kid to have someone that's a Christian, because of all the negative things that are being said around here, not just in the Catholic Church but in the Protestant Church also, then fine. But you can be a Christian and be in either program. It doesn't really matter.
Okay, so it's a parent's choice.
Right.
Okay. As I look at the organization and the advantages of both, what does it take to be a mentor? And we're getting close to running out of time, but what are the requirements to be a mentor, and what are the requirements to be a mentee?
Okay. To be a mentor, they need to be 18 or over. We actually have kids from Desert View High School that are going over to Los Niños and mentoring kids every week during the school year. It's been really successful. That's been exciting to see. And they have to fill out an application, get 4 references. We do a background check, fingerprints and all that. And then we do a personal interview with them. Okay. And so that's the mentor. The kid basically...
Well, from a mentor viewpoint, what is the commitment
level? The commitment is for a year, to meet every week for a year. If you miss a week, you pick it up the next week. If you're a U of A student and you're gone in the summer, or snowbird, like we have a lot here, then it's from as soon as school starts until school's out. Okay. So in 8 to 9 months. And then our hope is that they keep in touch over the summer if they're coming back or they haven't graduated, and pick it up when they get back. Okay.
And from a mentee, is it the parent that initiates it? Or?
The parent can initiate it.
Or the caregiver.
Or the caregiver or the school counselor. We just want to make sure that the application is complete and adequate.
Okay. So if you're interested in the programs that Don has available, he's ready and willing to talk to you, come to your organization and speak to the problem and what the solutions are and some of the things that the benefits that the mentoring will play. Don, could you give us your contact information?
Right. Our office is located at 400 East University. That's Trinity Presbyterian Church. They rent out a lot of their old school classrooms, and we have our office down there. And the phone number is 624-4765. Extension 1 is one-on-one mentoring, and extension 3 is mentoring Tucson's kids.
Okay, and you do have a website, right?
We do. For mentoring Tucson's kids, it's mentoringtucsonskids.com. For one-on-one mentoring, it's the number one mentoring.com.
All right, so if you had to speak to our audience, and what call to action would you give them?
Well, in the Bible it says that we're responsible to take care of the orphans and the widows. We have at least 30,000 orphans because biblically, if you do not have a father, you are an orphan. And we're not doing a great job at it yet in Tucson. We still have a lot of work to do. I would challenge everyone to consider taking a kid and making a difference in their life.
Don, we thank you for coming and sharing with us today. And I would like to thank you for watching, and may you consider supporting in some form or fashion. And if you're a church or another organization would like to get more information, please contact Don. The kids are waiting, and we can't afford to lose another generation. Thank you for watching Good News Tucson TV, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.